Welcome to the Friendly Podcast Guide, sorting through podcasts so you don't have to. I'm Andy Smiley, and I want to help you discover the right podcast without having to listen to an entire episode. Now, let's talk podcasts. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Zibby Owens is the host of this week's podcast, Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books, and I want to be her when I grow up. She is a rock star, and I can't wait for you to hear about why she started her podcast and how she is taking the podcast world by storm. Before we listen to my chat with Zibby, here are some details about the show. The show description is: Zibby Owens, author, podcaster, publisher, and mother of four, conducts warm, inquisitive interviews with authors on this award-winning, widely heralded literary podcast. The length of each episode is around 30 minutes, and it is kid ear-friendly most of the time, but if it isn't, Zibby puts a warning at the beginning of the episode so that you know to not listen to it around your kids. The series is ongoing with new episodes available daily. Before we learn more about the vibe of the show, we're going to take a quick break to talk about bookshop.org because of course we are. It's a book podcast today. Bookshop.org is a great way for you to buy books online, but also support local bookstores. You can find a specific local bookstore that you would like to support, and they will receive the full profit off of your order. Or your order will contribute to an earnings pool that will be evenly distributed among independent bookstores. You can see some of my favorite books for me and for my kiddos by going to my affiliate link at bookshop.org/shop/FPG. I'll also put the link in the show notes. Now we get to hear from Zibby about how this podcast actually started out as a book idea. I am so excited to have Zibby Owens on the podcast today. She has some fabulous podcasts, and I can't wait to talk to her about them. First of all, Zibby, could you introduce yourself for us?
Sure. Thanks so much for having me on. This is so fun. My name is Zibby Owens, and I am the creator and host of Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. I also co-host Sex Talk, SCXTOK, Sex Talk with Zibby and Tracy. And I have a podcast network with other shows that I've helped launch as well.
That is fabulous. I love all of that. The reason I started my podcast is because I love podcasts. So the fact that you have your own podcast network is so cool to me. So let's first just talk about Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. That's how I was introduced to you. And I love the premise of this podcast. Can you tell me, why did you start? Why did you start it?
It started when I was writing a bunch of parenting essays, and my husband said, you should really take all these essays and make them into a book. And I said, moms don't have time to read books. Then I was like, oh, that's so funny. That'll be the name of my book. But I heard from agents that publishers wouldn't find that funny. And another girlfriend suggested that I should build my platform anyway if I wanted to sell a book. And she said, you should really start a podcast. And I said, well, what's a podcast? Because I was living under a rock with my 4 kids and barely looking up. And this was in early 2018. And I went home and figured out podcasting and Googled what's the easiest way to start a podcast from your home, and recorded the first episode from my bedroom, and now I've been doing it for 4 years.
That's amazing. I love all of that. I feel like starting your own podcast is kind of hard, but it's also very doable. And I feel like you've shown me that it's doable for a long time. You can just keep on keeping on.
Yeah. I mean, I've grown it. I started with 1 a week. Originally, I wanted to read some of my own essays on the podcast. And then once I interviewed my first author, I realized that is what I wanted to do. I loved it. I love books. I've been a huge book lover. I'm a writer myself. And once I got another author, I used to do them all in person, sitting next to me and learning about them. It was intoxicating. Just loved it. And so I started with 1 a week. And when the pandemic hit in 2020, I had been up to about 2 a week. And then I went to 7 a week. So I've been doing 7 a week since March of 2020, nonstop.
That is awesome. That's a lot. Good for you. Okay, so can you tell me, what do you want people to get out of Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books?
First of all, just to remember that moms are really smart, interesting human beings, and not just moms. Even though you become a mom, there's this tendency to kind of lose our identities and forget. And also, I think in the content world, there is a tendency to pigeonhole moms. Okay, you're a mom now. Here you go. Here are the mom clothes, and here are the mom books, and here are the parenting books. And it's well, I'm still I'm still interested in all the other stuff. I just don't have as much time to consume it. But I like being intellectually challenged. I like reading. I love falling into other people's lives and characters and all of that. So my show is designed to increase excitement about reading and by introducing listeners to really amazing people who are authors who've written books. And it brings a whole new meaning to the books once you hear from the author, I think, as most people think. But yeah, I mean, the conversations are conversations less than interviews. It's a very personal show. It's like two friends chatting. We kind of skip the small talk and go right to like, well, tell me about that family trauma, you know? So I just ask all the questions that I'm curious about and that I want to know. And I'm not like a trained journalist. I'm just a very curious book lover and author worshiper. So I think there's a lot of excitement, and I think a lot of women can see themselves in me because, you know, I'm like them. I was a stay-at-home mom for 11 years, and I just went back to work 4 years ago, and now I have this whole big thing that I've created, and but it's all based on this podcast, which I adore it. I love doing it every day. It's like I did 2 this morning. I love it. I know I should cut down, but I can't seem to do it.
Oh my goodness. Well, that's wonderful. I feel like I love the idea of moms being more than just moms. Because it's true. Sometimes we kind of get caught in that, especially in the early years when there's a lot of need from little humans.
Yes. Yes.
And I feel like having a break from that and remembering that that's not all that you are is the need filler. Like you can have other thoughts and other like desires. That's a wonderful reminder that I feel like we all need.
And sometimes even if you don't have time to read the whole book, if you listen for 25, 30 minutes to this conversation about books and literature, and very accessible conversation, nothing like an English class or anything. But I do think it fills that same need a little bit until you can get reading a book again, or you have the time, or you regain some sanity. But it's for new moms who are crazy busy, but it's also for retired moms who have all the time in the world and just really want to like dig into who the authors are. So there's a big spread.
Totally. Well, yeah, I feel like that's the beauty of podcasts is you can listen to just the podcast, or you can listen to the podcast and then dive into all of the things that you learned from the podcast.
Yes.
There's a lot of different ways that you can use a podcast.
Agree.
So I feel like you touched on the vibe of your show by talking about it was just two friends talking. Do you want to dive a little deeper into like what the vibe of your show is and kind of like how people describe your show?
It is like two friends talking, in that it's very personal. It's intimate. It's real in the way that when girlfriends get together, they share, and I don't mean to be any gender bias. It doesn't have to just be girlfriends, but two close friends getting together and sharing thoughts and feelings and experiences. It's like that. It's like, and it also covers what's in the book too. So you're always learning about something. Sometimes it's more about the craft. It depends on what the book is, right? I'm doing a poetry one coming up. So I'm going to talk to it like, why poetry? I don't usually do poetry, but I'll do a cookbook show, and sure. We'll talk I'll be like, what did you have for breakfast? Do you know, like, I want to know about the person.
Yes.
And not that I'm like so hilarious, but I joke around and I try to keep it light, and I try to meet the guest where they are. If they're in a very soulful kind of deep mood, I can do that. And if they're more like reserved, I can try to draw them out a little bit, make them laugh. And if they're, stressed, I can calm them down. And if, best-selling author or celebrity, I don't know. I'm just like very comfortable, I think, around everybody, because I don't know, there's something we can all relate to about each other, and my job is to find it. So
that's fabulous. So I know this is going to be hard, but do you have a favorite episode or couple of episodes?
A favorite couple of episodes. I interviewed my dad when he had a book come out. That was one of my favorites. Yep, that was great. I interviewed First Lady Jill Biden before she was the First Lady, and it was such a nice, intimate conversation. She ended up like inviting me for Thanksgiving dinner, so that was really fun. Let's see. I really enjoyed talking to Seth Meyers recently and about his children's book. I had a children's book just come out as well from the same publisher, same editor. Mine's called Princess Charming. I don't know. I mean, I just did one this morning with an author named Lauren Lane, who wrote a book called Made in Manhattan, which is sort of a rom-com-y, New York-based fantasy-ish book, which I don't normally read, but I was so interested in how she had written something like 40 books already. And we had a great conversation about book marketing and what it takes to have your book break out and how to get all the writing in and how to balance the writing and the business of book writing. And it was fascinating. It was like, I have an MBA too, so I do have like a sliver, not much of a business brain, but enough that I find that very interesting. I find the branding aspect of all of it interesting for books, for authors, for podcasts. So
definitely. Okay, fabulous. Well, I will link all of those in the show notes so people can jump straight to them if they would like. So I do have, most of my listeners are moms. So I like to ask, is the podcast okay for little ears?
Yes. And when there's cursing, I put, don't listen in the car.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I needed to hear. Okay. Is there anything else that you want to add that we haven't touched on yet?
The website for the podcast is momsdon'thavetimeto-read-books.com, and it's on Instagram at momsdon'thavetimeto-read-books. You can also buy all the books that I recommend on the show on my bookshop.org storefront if you're interested in that. And yeah, I've done about 1,100 podcasts. It's been profiled on Good Morning America and CBS and all these really cool places. And I've interviewed all types of people, celebrities, athletes, chefs, memoirists. It's a very interesting, diverse show. And I think it's designed for you to have a little fun listening, because I have fun recording it, because life is too short to listen to a boring podcast.
Amen. Oh, I love that. Well, thank you so much. I'll also link all of your socials and your website in the show notes so people can jump there too. Thank you so much, Zibby. This has been a fabulous conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you want to hear more podcasts like Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books, Zibby has actually started her own podcast network called the Zcast Network. And you can find all the information about her network and all of the podcasts that are under it at zcastnetwork.com. And if you want to hear from me about more podcasts, please follow or subscribe on your podcast app of choice. And a reminder, if you want to buy books online and support your local bookstores, you can by using bookshop.org/shop/FPG. Talk to you soon.